Hey, everybody, this is Brian Foley. I am an attorney here in Conroe. We're going to be talking about the 5 common questions about DWI in Texas around New Year's Eve. And so, with New Year's Eve right around the corner on December 31st, a lot of us are planning celebrations, champagne toasts, parties, funs with friends. But this is one of the busiest times for law enforcement cracking down on drunk driving. As a DWI expert, I get tons of questions about DWI laws, especially the main Texas Penal Code section 49.04, which describes Texas law. So, we're going to go over some of those questions here today, and let's dive in. So, what exactly is a DWI under Texas law? Well, the Texas Penal Code section 4904 defines driving while intoxicated as operating a motor vehicle in a public place while intoxicated. And so those are, we would call those the elements of the crime of DWI. So operating is an element. They have to show you are actually using the vehicle. Notice it doesn't say driving, it says operating. So sometimes we get cases where a client has been found in their car. They woke up, they went to sleep in a parking lot after drinking at a bar or something like that, and they get woken up by an officer at 3 or 4 in the morning. Well, it was cold out, so the person turned their car on. They never moved the car. But if you're in the driver's seat, your foot's on the brake, the car has been turned on, officers are probably going to believe that that's operating. And there's no clear definition under Texas law for operating. It's more just what a juror's common sense is going to tell them. So then, obviously, it has to be a motor vehicle. Motor vehicle actually has a unique description under the penal code where it includes anything that's capable of being drawn on a highway, as well as motor vehicles, like propelled motor vehicles. There's different definitions for motor vehicles. So if you have an unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, a theft, basically of a car, then that says motor propelled vehicle, but that's not the same thing for DWI. So like technically a sled that could be drawn by a horse on a highway could count as a motor vehicle for something like this. So don't like get in a sleigh ride, this winter season and be telling the horse to go with the reins and all that. That could still be a DWI in Texas, technically. So public place, let's talk about public place. Is a private parking lot at a business a public place? Well, if the general public has access to it, like there's a turnoff from a public road, yeah, it's going to be considered a public place. What about your own land? Let's say you're doing fireworks on your own property and you have to drive past a locked gate. Well, technically, that's not a public place. It's not going to be an offense under 4904, but it could be some other offense. Certainly, if you have like a wreck or something like that, could be some negligent behavior as well. If you're operating a vehicle on your own property while intoxicated, it's just not a violation of 49.04. And then the one that gets argued about the most is the word intoxicated. Intoxicated means not having the normal use of your mental or physical faculties due to alcohol, drugs, or some other substance. Really, any substance can be used here. So, if you had too much apple cider and that somehow or another got you to lose your normal mental faculties, well, then that could be a problem for you. An officer could believe that you're intoxicated. Now, if we get that case, we're probably going to win that one, right? We're going to see no alcohol, no drugs, and nobody's going to believe the apple cider stuff. I've yet to find a prosecutor willing to prosecute something like that. But technically, it can happen. Having a blood alcohol concentration of 0.08 or higher, a breath alcohol concentration of 0.08 or higher, or even a urine alcohol concentration. Again, I have never seen a prosecutor bring a urine sample in a DWI. Normally it's breath or blood. But with the New Year's parties, so remember this is not a definition only of a certain alcohol level. So sometimes people will get that little calculator or go on even on an AI and say, okay, this is my height, this is my weight, this is what I'm planning on eating and drinking. What's my alcohol level going to be? Well, if you're not a regular drinker, like for my mom, for example, growing up, never drank hardly at all. But every now and then on New Year's, she would have a glass of champagne and she started acting funny. I could tell her mental faculties were affected even by one glass of champagne. So a buzzed feeling or something like that, that could be used by a prosecutor to argue that you are in violation of this law if you are driving while your normal mental faculties are being affected at all. So you got to be careful here, obviously. Question number 2, what is the legal breath or blood alcohol limit? Does it change for the holidays? We get this a lot. Sometimes people think a no refusal or zero tolerance means that there's no alcohol allowed in your system at all. Well, that's not true either. If you're not impaired by your mental or physical faculties and your breath is so that you could have a suspension because of zero point zero 0.04, but you still can't be convicted of DWI unless it's above 0.08 or you've lost the normal use of your mental or physical faculties. But again, you might have a suspension in that 0.05, 0.06 range, whereas a regular person without a commercial driver's license is not going to have a driver's license suspension because of a 0.06. That's under the limit. And if you gave a breath test, you didn't refuse, you're not going to have that driver's license suspension. For anyone under 21, you could get arrested, maybe not for DWI, but for DUI, driving under the influence of alcohol, which we do have a DUI here in Texas, but it's only for people who are under 21. For people under 21, any detectable amount of alcohol could mean a DUI charge. It's a lower charge. It's only a Class C instead of a Class B misdemeanor, but it could be filed. If your breath is above 0.15 or right at 0.15, you could be charged for a Class A misdemeanor DWI. It's got harsher penalties. It's up to a year in jail, up to a $4,000 fine. So, make sure if you are celebrating, if you eat something that is not necessarily going to stop the alcohol from absorbing into your bloodstream, people say, drink water afterwards. That's fine, but none of that is going to affect alcohol. What affects alcohol coming into your system is the amount of alcohol that goes into your mouth. So drink less, don't drink at all if you really are concerned about this and don't want to end up with a case like this. If you do, obviously we're here to help, but that is the best advice for this. If it is New Year's Eve and you are pulled over by an officer for speeding or for weaving in your lane or something like that, and you say you have drank alcohol, if you have alcohol in your breath, you are likely going to be arrested for DWI. They're going to make you try to do field sobriety tests. They're going to make you do breath or blood tests, but whatever those numbers are, you're probably going to be arrested for DWI. So just be careful out there, especially in Montgomery County, Conroe, Woodlands area. So what are the penalties for first-time DWI? We've kind of gone over this a little bit, but the one that is really a concern for most people, they don't understand how this works, is if you look at the statute, it says there is a minimum jail time of 3 days up to 180 days in jail. This is one of the only misdemeanor Class B offenses that has a minimum jail time. That 3 days, though, can be sort of worked around. A lot of times, what happens at the jail is they give you 2-for-1 credit for every day that you've been in jail. Well, if you've been in jail for 1 hour, they're going to count that as 1 day. You won't be in there for 1 hour. It'll be more like 8 to 12. But if you've been in there at all during 1 day or over the course of 2 days, then you're going to get 2-for-1 credit for each day. You might end up with 4 days credit. You get arrested at 11:30, which on New Year's, you probably going to get arrested 12:30 to 3, sometime in there. If in any case, what'll happen is you will stay in the jail. You'll have this credit for this time that you served in the jail. And then the prosecutor later on can award you credit for the time that you've already served. Or if a probation agreement is reached, then you can avoid that 3 days jail time by probating a longer sentence between 3 and 180 days. And obviously, if we get it dismissed, you're not going to serve any jail time. It's a dismissal. So Class A misdemeanor, if that's that 0.15 or higher, it's up to a $4,000 fine, up to a year in jail. But funny enough, the legislature, when they created this statute, did not include the minimum 3 days. So it's from 0 to 180 days in jail. If you ever run across a problem with handling a case like this, if they want to do a fine only and the prosecutor says, no, you got to go back to jail for 3 days. Well, you could charge it as a Class A 0.15 or greater, and there is no minimum 3 days in jail for that. Just an oversight by the legislature. They're not perfect, folks. Okay, so what is the no refusal thing that I hear about on New Year's Eve? Here's the answer to what is no refusal. Many counties in Texas declare a no refusal period during high-risk holidays like New Year's Eve. But it doesn't mean that you can't refuse a breath test. It doesn't mean that you can't refuse a blood test. What it means is that if you refuse to consent to the taking of a sample of your breath or blood, then the police are going to have access to a judge and a prosecutor who can write a warrant get the judge to review the warrant and then sign it, where they can then force you to give a sample of your blood. So if you are in the process of being arrested for DWI, there's no real great advice these days about how to handle yourself. If you believe you're totally sober, you've not had any alcohol in your system, then you may consent to a blood draw or request a blood draw. But the police officers don't have to let you do a blood draw. They could say, well, I want a sample of your breath, and that's it. And as I think most people know, the breath test instrument is less reliable than blood tests. And so some people don't want to do that. Or some people are afraid of needles. They don't want to do a blood test. They'd rather do a breath test. The one advantage to doing a breath test is if you have any other substances in your system, then the breath test is only going to test for alcohol. Consenting to a breath test, if you feel like you're intoxicated on something else, is probably going to be a better idea. But in general, the officer's probably going to get a search warrant for your blood. If he thinks there's something else on board other than alcohol, you're going to end up in this situation where you have a search warrant for your blood. So what do you do? Well, if it is late enough at night, if it is like 3 or 4 in the morning, especially in Montgomery County, sometimes they will not actually seek a search warrant for your breath or blood. If it's 11:30, midnight or so, they're probably going to get that search warrant. But on New Year's Eve, they're going to get a search warrant all the time, all night. And that search warrant is going to allow an officer not only to collect your blood at a hospital, or they could do it at the jail, anywhere where there's a phlebotomist, a person whose job it is to take blood. Anywhere where one exists, that officer can enlist their assistance. So what happens if you try to refuse to allow them to take that sample? Well, they're going to slap on a resisting arrest charge. And whereas you may have had only a Class B misdemeanor DWI, if you do not cooperate with their ability to execute this warrant, well, then they could charge Class A misdemeanor resisting arrest. And if your case was on the fence, let's say you're a med student and you are looking to try to get a DWI taken care of, turns out you were particularly intoxicated, it's likely maybe you said something like that on video, that's not a great case to try to win. But there is an option for what's called pretrial diversion, where this is sort of a one-off situation. You just got dumped that night. Your date left you high and dry on New Year's Eve. You had a little too much to drink. You decided to drive home because you want to tell your buddies, come pick me up because my girlfriend just dumped me. Well, in that situation, you might be eligible for a pretrial diversion or intervention, which is a special type of probation that ends with a dismissal. But the DA has to approve that. Well, if you were non-cooperative and resisted arrest and resisted search of your blood, the DA is not going to approve that kind of a thing. So anytime you're dealing with the police, the best advice is normally to not answer all of their questions. You don't have to do that, but to be polite about it. People ask me all the time, and I think this is the next question is, what do I say to the police if the police want to talk to me? If you're driving in your car, you can just say, thank you, officer. I prefer, before we ask any other questions, I'd like to be able to talk to a lawyer. He's not going to let you do that. He's not going to let you call a lawyer or talk to a lawyer. He's going to go through his process. And then it's up to you to decide, do you want to participate in that? Do you want to put on videotape evidence of you performing field sobriety tests, like a one-leg stand, a walk and turn, things like that? That's going to be up to you to decide what to do at that point. You're either going to be putting evidence on video for a jury to analyze your ability, or you're going to refuse to do that, and the jury will get to consider the fact that you refuse. But if you request a lawyer immediately like that, you are pretty likely to get arrested for DWI, and they're probably going to try to get a warrant, but it's going to limit the amount of evidence that they have. And on a time like New Year's Eve, the amount of likelihood you're going to get arrested anyway if you smell like alcohol and we're driving is pretty high. So we would call that case a total refusal case. You're probably not going to get a pretrial intervention on a total refusal case. So if you're that med student and you think you're a little bit intoxicated, it's probably better advice for you to go along with the test, talk with the officer. I wouldn't apologize for being intoxicated or anything like that, but that's a death knell for your case. But you have to have some level of cooperation with the police if we're going to get a pretrial intervention in some place like Montgomery County. If you'd have a total refusal like that, where you say, I want to talk to my lawyer and that's it, they're going to hold that against you. Maybe it's not fair, but they're going to hold it against you. The way we're going to win that case is try to win that at a trial or negotiating with the prosecutors to show like you just can't prove this case based on either a lack of a blood warrant, if they didn't get a blood warrant, a lack of evidence of mental and physical faculties not being there because they just don't have any evidence of that because you didn't do any of the tests, right? That's the situation that's happening when you're getting pulled over on the side of the road, on New Year's Eve. Other times, like let's say you're not in your car. Let's say you have already made it home and somebody had called in and you're inside your house. Well, you don't have to answer the door for police. If the police have a warrant to come into your house, they can break down your door for a felony warrant or a search warrant, but not for a misdemeanor arrest warrant. So if you're already home, then there's no requirement for you to open the door for police and say, yeah, I was just at the bar, I drove my car home, and still the hood's still warm in the driveway. You see, they're all those things are things they would use to show that you are actually driving the car or that you have driven the car recently. But if they can't talk to you at all because you're inside your house, you don't answer the door, well, they're not going to have any of that evidence. Maybe if there was something that happened, like you hit the mailbox or something like that, and that's why somebody called, well, you could get a failure to stop and give information case, which is a Class B, much less penalizing than a DWI. So that is the situation there on a Christmas Eve type situation. But I always like to say this in general. If an officer calls you on the phone or tries to talk to you at your door and you don't know what it's about, the only words you should ever say to that officer are, "Thank you, officer. Can I get your name and number? And I'll have my attorney give you a call." And the officer's not going to like that. They're going to say something like, "Oh, well, sir, I'm just trying to get are you Brian Foley?" And as soon as you say yes, you have now let that officer know, yes, they have the identity of the right person that for whatever reason they thought lived here or whatever. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to give them literally anything at all. You don't want to confirm your name, your date of birth, where you live, who you live with, where you were last Friday night. You don't want to tell them anything at all because the first few things they're going to be asking you, the first words out of your mouth are going to be responses that they need to help prove their case, right? Literally, the only words you should ever say to an officer who's trying to talk to you about something is, "Thank you, officer. Let me get your name, the officer's name, and phone number so that I can have my lawyer give you a call back." "Well, I just need to confirm, are you Brian?" "Officer, I appreciate you talking with me about this, but I need your name and phone number. I will have my attorney call you back." "Well, you need to come with me." Well, right now, if they try to arrest you or something like that, you're going to have to go with them. But most of the time, an officer is just trying to talk to you like that is not trying to arrest you. They're just trying to get a confession, especially if it's over the phone. Obviously, they're not going to be able to arrest you. They want you to start answering questions. "I called this number. Is this Brian Foley? Is this is a police officer? Well, I just need your name and number. I'll have my attorney call you back." Hard advice to actually follow through with, but that's the best advice if an officer tries to call you on the phone or in person tries to talk with you. So how do you avoid a DWI this New Year's Eve, right? Simplest answer: don't drink and operate your vehicle. A lot of people say don't drink and drive, but you could get arrested for DWI if you get drunk at a bar, you go back to your car and they find you with the keys in the ignition or keys in the car. And if it's a push button start, the car is on. I think in Texas, probably even if you were using a self-driving Tesla, unless you're in Austin and you're in the back seat of it, then you probably are still operating that vehicle. If it's your Tesla and you're telling it where to go, you turned it on, that's going to be a close call. But unless you're using like a Waymo or an Uber, a Lyft, or full self-driving car, I would say you're probably going to get some kind of allegation of operating motor vehicle while intoxicated. So obviously, try to have a ride if you're in these kind of situations. If you don't have a ride, try to get one of those apps working. Download the app beforehand as a precaution because it's way cheaper even to do $100 or $150 Uber ride from downtown Houston back to your home in the Woodlands or wherever you need to go. Or it's cheaper to get a hotel wherever you're at than it is to end up getting a DWI, trying to have to pay a lawyer like me to help defend you. So, appreciate everybody. I hope you have a great New Year's Eve and you celebrate safely. You're not stressing over a DWI. But if you do end up having a DWI, we're here to help. Give us a call if you have any questions about this. As always, these videos are for educational purposes only. Don't just watch this and think you're good to go. If you have real questions about a specific case, make sure to talk to a lawyer. We'll see you next time.